Welcome to r/EntitledPeople, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them, and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story, From Fence Wars to Fire Pit Feuds, Surviving My Crazy Neighbor's Relentless Shenanigans. The second story, How a Small Town's Obsession with Chinese Food Turned into National Drama. The third story, How One Client's Cheapness Cost Him Thousands and Ended Our Partnership. The first story is, Crazy neighbor ruined my lawn, put fence on my property, then called the cops anytime I had people over. Bought my first house nearly 5 years ago. I wish I had known how crazy my neighbors were. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but this is a long one. My house was a foreclosure that I needed to gut and basically redo everything. A few months after I finally finish the house and move in, someone knocks on my door. It's the landlord for next door. Next to me lives an older man and woman, who I found out are brother and sister, and rent from this guy who's now at my front door. He asks if they can drive a truck on my front lawn to pour some concrete in their basement. Our houses are pretty close together. Where they needed to pour the concrete was only accessible from my front yard. Me, trying to be the nice neighbor that I am, I agree to let them, but made clear that if the truck messed up my lawn, they'll need to fix it. The landlord agrees. A few weeks later, I come home to see 2 strips in my lawn, from the truck tires of the concrete truck, and a small pile of concrete on my lawn. I let it sit there for a day, thinking the neighbors will come over and clean it up. 2 days go by, nothing happens. I see the brother and sister outside working in their garden, and said hello, and asked them if they're finished with pouring the concrete. They told me yes, thanks for letting us drive on the lawn. I then pointed to the pile of concrete and the strips on my lawn. They apologized and said they'll throw down some grass seed and clean up the concrete. Next day, concrete is gone, but no grass seed. The next night, I had some people over my house. I have a fire pit in my backyard and hang out with friends every now and then. Some of my friends walk between my house and the neighbors to get to the backyard where the fire is. Apparently, the old man neighbor knocked on the window and yelled at them for being over there. Half of it is my property, so they aren't trespassing. I don't really think anything of it. The next day, still no grass seed, I go to Home Depot to pick up some other things. I buy a bag of seed and figured I'd give the neighbor the receipt and have them pay for it. When I get home, I find a small 4-foot fence between our houses. There's about 10 feet or so between our houses. So half of this is on my property. That side of the house also has my propane tank and my water faucet, which I no longer have access to due to this fence. So I walk next door and knock on the door. I mention the grass seed and give the guy the receipt. He refuses to take it and says, "You have to talk to her about that," meaning his sister. I said, "Okay, so what's going on with the fence you just put up?" The guy sort of flips and starts yelling, saying, "I don't want your friends walking over there, looking in my windows." I stayed calm and said, "Well, I apologize about that, but half of that's my property, and I need access over there." The guy just kept yelling and said he wasn't moving it, and then closed the door on my face. I was kind of shocked and said to myself under my breath, "Wow, F you, buddy," and turned to start walking back to my house. Apparently the guy heard this. He comes charging out of the door and runs right at me like a bull and shoves me as hard as he can. I wasn't expecting this at all and nearly fell over. This guy's like 5'6" and late 60s. I'm 5'9" in my late 20s at this point. The guy starts screaming at me, "Don't you talk to me like that." Then he runs at me and shoves me again. This time I'm ready for it and push back into him, so I basically stay where I'm at. I'm a pretty laid-back guy, and have never really been in a fight. I figure my options are to either knock out an old guy or walk away. But something flipped in my brain. I got right up in his face and said, "If you're gonna hit me, old man, effing hit me." The guy shoves me again. At this point I said, "You're not worth it." Got in my car, drove to the police station, and filed a report. The cops said they'd talk to him about the problem, but couldn't do anything about the fence since it's a civil matter. The cops went by and talked to him, and he apparently admitted it, as they arrested him and charged him with assault. When I got home, I simply pulled the fence out of the ground. It wasn't cemented or anything, thank God, and stuck it back in the ground on his side of the property line on an angle, so I could still easily get to my faucet and propane tank. The fence disappeared a few days later. After this is where all hell breaks loose. 2 weeks later, I have another fire. Me and 4 other people, around 10:30 p.m. I see flashing lights and see 2 firefighters walking into my backyard, saying they were called for a fire. They look at my pit, see nothing wrong, and say someone called about a fire. Gee, I wonder who. The firefighters leave, but since my street is so narrow they can't turn the engine around, so they have to back down my entire street at 10 p.m. with a loud blaring beep 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 the entire time. Must have woken up the whole neighborhood. Next week I have another fire. This time around 10:30 p.m. the cops show up, saying they were called for a noise complaint. I wasn't even playing music. Cops agree there's no loud noise and leave. Next week, same thing. Have a fire, cops show up, say everything is fine and leave. This goes on a few more times. A month or so later I have another party. Cops show up at 10 p.m. on the dot for another noise complaint from an anonymous neighbor. At this point I start to get into it with the cops. I let them know I understand they're doing their jobs, but this is becoming harassment. They agree and said they'd look into it. 2 hours later I get a knock on my door. It's the police again. I go outside and close the door behind me to talk to the cop. The cop starts yelling at me, saying he's going to arrest me for filing a false police report, saying that I called the cops on my neighbor in retaliation. No one at the party called the police. I let the cop know that no one called the police, and he must have his information wrong. The cop tried to big league me, saying, "We know for a fact it came from your house. We have phone records." I said, "Oh really? Well, I don't even have a landline in the house. How can you know it came from me?" The cop sort of paused. I then went back at him, and I was a few beers deep at this point. I said, "Listen, officer, I understand you have to follow up all calls you receive, but this is the second time you've been here tonight. Check the records. You've been here 6 or 7 times in the past month or so, and I've never even received a warning. Every single time it's an anonymous complaint, which I know you can't tell me is coming from that a-hole over there." I pointed at the neighbor's window, which was open, so he definitely heard me. At this point, I'm considering a lawsuit for harassment. If you show up at my house again, you better have a warrant, or else you can just keep knocking on the door. I won't answer. I then went back in my house and closed the door. Next few parties I had, no police at all. No fire, nothing. Finally, I won. But wait, there's more. Fast forward a few months. I'm getting my driveway redone. 2 trucks pull up to my house, and apparently there was a McDonald's bag someone had thrown in the street the night before. When the trucks pulled up, the wind from the trucks somehow blew the McDonald's bag in front of my neighbor's house, but still in the street. My neighbor sees the phone number on the side of one of the trucks. He calls it and flips out on the guy, saying they're dumping trash in the street. The guy says it's not them and hangs up. 20 minutes later, the cops show up. The driveways guy said they didn't even go to McDonald's today. The bag had spilled out some of its contents. The driveway guy picks up a box of chicken nuggets, looks at his watch, and then says to the cop, "See, this couldn't have been me. It's only 10 a.m., and these are chicken nuggets. You can't get chicken nuggets until 10:30. The cop agreed with him and told us we were fine. He went back over to the crazy neighbor and ended up putting the bag in his garbage. So far, it's been almost 2 years since I've had them call the cops on me. Hopefully it's finally over, but anytime I have people over, I always wonder if the cops will show up. The second story is, my small town is fighting over Chinese food. This is entitled People on the large scale, and it's too hilarious not to share. I live in a small town, population 7,000 roughly, and everyone is currently divided over a Chinese restaurant. It's been in the local news and Australia's national news. That's how crazy people are getting. I'm going to try to keep this short. Back in May of this year, a local Chinese restaurant owner informed the local club he was renting kitchen space from that he wanted to retire, gave them his resignation, stating his last operating day would be the end of June. Cue the local Karens and Kevins en masse. One local, who we will call Big Kevin, teamed up with another local we will call Mega Karen, and they decided they were going to protest against the closing and force the club to keep the restaurant open. This poor man's been running the restaurant for 30 years without break and just wanted to retire peacefully. But no, Mega Karen started a petition while Big Kevin organized a protest. Now our third major player in this we shall call the Wicked Witch. The Wicked Witch, working in the shadows, started leaking to the local paper that said restaurant owner is being forced out by the club. False allegation. The club gives their first and only statement about the situation, stating that the restaurant owner retired and even produced his retirement paperwork for proof. At this point, the national news comes into it and does an interview with restaurant owner, who states on the news he wants to retire. You would think that would be the end of it, but no. Mega Karen gets 1,200 or so signatures on her petition, which she hands to the club. The club's lawyer calls it invalid due to over 900 of the signatures not being filled in properly. Signature plus printed name plus club membership number or phone number needed by each person to make it valid. Or same person signed multiple petition slots. So Mega Karen starts a new petition, which only gets 74 signatures. Meanwhile, Big Kevin organizes a protest he doesn't show up for, nor does anyone else. The club then hosts a meeting for all club members, members of the general public, and the club's board to discuss what's going on. But again, for all the complaints, no one shows up. Now Mega Karen and Big Kevin are demanding that a new meeting be held, the club's general manager be fired, and the club's board be disbanded and a new board elected. The Wicked Witch then once again goes to the newspaper with a statement from the restaurant owner. The restaurant's now been closed for over a month, and states that now the club has renovated the restaurant and has plans to start a new restaurant they, the old restaurant, would consider renting the space again. Before you question why the space wasn't renovated before this point, it was part of the Chinese restaurant's agreement that they would maintain and renovate the space as they saw fit, as stated by the club in their public statement. And she tells the paper that the whole reason the Chinese restaurant left wasn't because they wanted to retire, but because their rent increased from the $285 a week they had paid for 28 years to $385 a week last year, and then $485 a week this year for a restaurant space, when other local restaurants are paying $2,500 a week plus for the same or smaller places. So Big Kevin, Mega Karen, and a ton of other locals were all shocked at the cost of rent, which they're now all saying should have been kept at the $285 to encourage the restaurant to stay, even though it meant likely closing the club, since they were struggling to afford running costs. The club even broke down their running costs to show the members and locals how expensive it is to keep the place open, but still not good enough. I can't with this town anymore. The third story is, he doesn't want to pay me a reasonable rate. After 25 years working with this one guy, I told him I was increasing my hourly rate. He was like, haha, we'll talk about it. Following month, I bill him at the new rate. He calls me up and lies about what clients will pay for my time. I told him I wouldn't argue money with him ever, and he lost his temper and said a number of nasty things. After that call, I said, well, that's it. I don't work for this guy anymore. Next day, he calls me about a project I was currently working on that was nearly finished. Told him I was just waiting on his sign off on a couple of things to complete. He nastily tells me that he'll take care of it. Fine, I figure now I'm totally done with this BS. Next day, he calls and asks me what I will charge to do this other project for him. Now, this was a long-term, annual 7 to 10 months thing that I had been doing all the main work on for the past 10 years. I was literally the only person who had the experience in all the files, and I had concocted a couple of neat little tools for analyzing the numbers more easily. I had designed a database to manage the data and generate the end-of-project reports required by the corporate client. Also knew all the contacts at the various facilities who were submitting the data. Considering my low pay rate and the premium amount the clients were paying, it was literally just picking free money up off the ground for him. I nicely told him that he'd said unforgivable things to me, shown that he had contempt for me and my work, and that I'd never work for him again. Sent him all the electronic files, less my personal management tools, and he sent another contractor to pick up the pallet load of paper records. Haven't spoken to him since. No regrets. Epilogue. Heard through the grapevine that he tried to do the project himself that year, even drafting his wife into doing something of the scut work. Client chose to discontinue. Or maybe his wife told him to get stuffed. Either way, he set fire to many thousands of dollars that day, just because he was too effing cheap to pay me a reasonable rate. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have a good day.